The docking bay of the Imperial fleet's forward base was loud with the sound of engines and footsteps. Captain Rourke stood near the main gate, his arms crossed, eyes scanning the hangar for the person who was supposed to replace him. He had been told to expect a commanding officer sent directly from the Empire's High Council. Someone with experience, wisdom, and a long history of victories. He imagined a tall war hero. Maybe a decorated general with a scar across the face. Someone who could command fear just by walking into the room. Instead, what he saw made his jaw tighten. A small figure entered the hangar. Her head barely reaching Rourke's chest. She was an alien. Her skin a faint silver blue. Her eyes large and bright like polished metal. She wore an oversized officer's coat that looked like it had been made for someone twice her size. The sleeves covered part of her hands. And yet, she walked with a calm, almost cold confidence. Behind her came two guards, both much taller. Carrying her travel case, the crew around Rourke stopped working to watch. Whispers filled the air. Was this a joke? Was this the High Council's idea of a commander? Rourke felt heat in his face. He had spent years earning his position, fighting battles on distant worlds, and now the Empire sent a pint-sized alien to take over. She stopped in front of him, her chin slightly lifted. "Captain Rourke," she said in a voice that was soft but sharp, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. "I am Commander Avell. I will be taking command of this ship." Effective immediately, she handed him a sealed data tablet with the High Council's seal. The orders were real. Rourke didn't take the tablet right away. "There must be a mistake," he said. "I was told my replacement would be someone qualified." A few crew members glanced at each other, trying not to smile. Commander Avell's lips curved into a small smile. "You will find, Captain, that I am more than qualified." She turned away from him and looked at the ship like she already owned it. "We depart in 2 hours." "Depart?" Rourke asked, his voice rising. "We haven't even received mission briefings." "I have," she said, not looking at him. "The mission is already planned." Commanded this ship for years, and now, in less than a minute, this tiny stranger had demoted him. His pride screamed at him to refuse to fight, to demand the High Council explain themselves. But the seal on the tablet told him everything was official. Around them, the crew didn't hide their confusion. Some stared at the small alien in disbelief. Others exchanged worried glances. They knew Rourke. They trusted him. But this was new. Avell walked toward the bridge without waiting for Rourke. She moved with quick, efficient steps, as if she already knew the entire layout of the ship. Rourke followed, partly because he didn't want her walking alone into his command space, and partly because he needed to see what she would do next. On the bridge, she didn't waste time. She stepped up to the main console and tapped in a security override code that even Rourke didn't know. The screens lit up with classified data streams, maps of enemy positions, and highlighted points deep inside hostile territory. "Our target," she said, pointing to a flashing red marker on the map, "is an enemy shipyard in Sector 14. They're building a superweapon capable of destroying entire fleets with a single strike." Her eyes moved over the crew. "If we do not act now, the Empire will fall within the year." Rourke's first instinct was to challenge her. "You can't be serious. That shipyard is in heavily guarded space. No one has ever made it in and come out alive." "That's why we will," she replied, her voice calm but final. "We have a window of 36 hours before their patrol cycle changes. We will slip in, destroy the weapon before it is operational, and leave before they know what happened." The crew looked at Rourke, waiting for him to take control, to argue. But something in Avell's tone made them pause. She wasn't asking for opinions, she was giving orders. When Rourke still didn't speak, she turned to him. "Captain, prepare your crew for departure, and make sure they are ready for covert operations. Rourke's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. Yes. Commander, the word tasted bitter in his mouth. As Avelle moved to inspect the ship's systems, Rourke watched her closely. He wanted to find weakness. Some sign that the High Council had made a mistake, but the way she handled the crew, the precision in her voice, the way she scanned each system with sharp attention. It made him uneasy. This was no child, no token officer sent for political reasons. She knew what she was doing, and deep down, Rourke hated to admit it, but a part of him was curious. Who was this pint-sized alien, and why had the High Council trusted her with such a mission? The crew worked quietly on the bridge, but Rourke could feel the tension in the air. It was like a storm waiting to break. Commander Avelle stood near the main console, reviewing data feeds with quick, precise movements. She didn't speak unless she had to, but her presence filled the room in a strange way. She was small, yes, but there was nothing small about the way she carried herself. Rourke leaned on the edge of the navigation table, watching her. His mind kept replaying the moment she had demoted him. The sting was still fresh. He had spent his life earning the respect of this crew, and now a newcomer barely half his size had taken his seat in less than a day. He decided to test her. He waited until she began explaining the mission plan to the crew. "We will approach Sector 14 under the cover of a trade route," she said, pointing to the star map once inside. "We will use the asteroid belt here to mask our energy signature. That will allow us to get close enough to Rourke cut in. That's risky. Those asteroids have unpredictable drift patterns. One wrong calculation and we'll tear the hull apart." His voice was loud enough for the whole crew to hear. Several heads turned. The crew looked between their captain former captain and the new commander, waiting to see who would win this exchange. Avelle didn't raise her voice. "I am aware of the risks," she said. "But it is the only approach the enemy will not expect. Their patrol routes focus on the open lanes. They will never think a military ship would take this path." Rourke folded his arms. Or maybe they expect exactly that. Maybe they're waiting for someone bold enough to try. "We could be walking into an ambush." For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Avelle tapped her fingers against the console, then brought up a series of encrypted data files. The crew leaned closer as she unlocked them with a code Rourke had never seen. On the screen appeared real-time surveillance of enemy movements. "Recorded by deep cover agents, these," she said, "are intelligence reports from inside the shipyard itself. They show the exact timing of patrol rotations and the gaps in their coverage. I received them directly from the High Council's intelligence branch." She looked at Rourke, her eyes steady. "They have never shared this level of detail with you, have they?" Rourke's jaw tightened. The truth was no. He had never seen data like this. Even during his most dangerous missions, the Council had never trusted him with this kind of classified information. She went on. "This is not a gamble, Captain. This is calculated precision. I do not make guesses. I make decisions based on facts." Her gaze swept across the crew. "And the fact is this plan will work." Some of the crew shifted uneasily. Others nodded slightly, impressed. Rourke could feel his hold on them slipping. He needed to say something to remind them who had kept them alive through countless missions. "You talk about facts," he said. "But war isn't clean. Things go wrong. People die. Plans fall apart the second you meet the enemy." He stepped forward. "You can read reports all day, Commander. But when the first shot is fired, it's experience that keeps you alive, not fancy data." Her expression didn't change, but her tone grew sharper. "Then stay close to me, Captain, and you will gain experience you've never had before." The crew's eyes widened. That was a challenge, plain and clear. And Rourke could see from the way she stood that she was not going to back down. Later, in the corridor outside the bridge, Avelle caught up to him. Her voice was lower now, almost personal. I know you don't trust me yet, and I don't blame you, she said. But I was not sent here to replace you because you failed. I was sent because this mission requires something you cannot provide alone. And what's that? He asked, his tone edged with frustration. She looked him in the eye. Access? He frowned. She explained, the High Council does not give certain clearances to humans. Not because you are weak, but because you are unpredictable in the eyes of alien politics. I am their bridge into information you have never been allowed to see. Without me, you would be flying blind into a slaughter. Her words left a bitter taste, but they also carried a strange weight. For the first time, Rourke began to wonder if her presence was less about replacing him and more about protecting the mission itself. By the time they reached the crew quarters, word of their exchange had spread. Some crew members still sided with Rourke, loyal to the man who had led them through fire and back. Others seemed quietly impressed by Avel's control and knowledge. The ship felt divided, but one thing was clear to everyone: the mission was real. The danger was certain, and whether they liked it or not, Commander Avel was not going to be easy to push aside. As the ship's engines roared to life, and they began to move toward deep space, Rourke stood at the observation deck, staring out at the endless stars. He told himself he would keep testing her, keep finding cracks in her armor. But a small part of him, deep down, was beginning to suspect that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what the Empire needed. The war room was quiet, except for the low hum of the holoprojector. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the walls. Commander Avel stood at the center table, her small figure surrounded by swirling blue holograms of ships, stations, and star systems. The crew gathered around, their faces tense. They knew this was the moment when the mission would be laid bare. Rourke stood at the back, arms folded. He didn't want to admit it, but curiosity had pulled him here as much as duty. He still didn't trust Avel, but the classified data she had shown earlier lingered in his mind. It was more than he had ever been given, and he wanted to know why. Avel began without ceremony. Our target is the Velcor shipyard in Sector 14, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The hologram shifted, showing a massive structure orbiting a dying red star. The shipyard was surrounded by defense platforms, minefields, and patrol ships. It looked impenetrable. This shipyard, she continued, is not just building warships. They are constructing a superweapon, known as the Sun Piercer. It is capable of firing an energy beam that can cut through planetary shields and destroy entire fleets in one shot. The first prototype is almost complete. Within 40 hours, it will be operational. Murmurs rippled through the crew. Rourke stepped forward slightly. Even if what you're saying is true, that place is a fortress. How do you expect us to get close enough to do anything? Avel zoomed in on a section of the shipyard, revealing a cluster of civilian docking bays. We won't go in as soldiers, she said. We will go in as traders. Carrying a shipment of industrial coolant, it's a common supply run for neutral trade routes in that sector. It will give us a reason to dock without raising suspicion. Rourke frowned. You think they won't scan the ship? They'll see our weapons, our armor, everything. Her silver blue fingers danced across the console, revealing schematics of their own ship. By the time we arrive, our weapons will be offline and hidden, power signatures masked. Even our ID codes will show as a registered merchant vessel from the Kralin trade network. She glanced at Rourke. I had the codes prepared before I even boarded your ship. Several crew members exchanged surprised looks. She had been planning this long before she arrived. Rourke still wasn't convinced. Fine, suppose we dock. How do you plan to destroy a superweapon from inside its own base? For the first time, Avel's lips curved into a faint smile. That's the part they will never expect. She tapped the table again, and the hologram changed to show narrow maintenance shafts running through the shipyard's core. These shafts are not designed for humans. They are too small, too tight, but I can move through them. The crew began to understand. Her small size was not a weakness. Sit was the key. I will plant high-yield charges along the Sunpiercer's power. Conduits, she continued, once detonated, the overload will rip through the entire structure. Leaving nothing but debris, Rourke stared at the plan. His instincts screamed at him. You're talking about going in alone? If something goes wrong, you'll be trapped with no way out. She met his gaze without fear. If something goes wrong, you will get this crew to safety. That is your role, Captain. Her words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't arrogance, she was simply prepared to die for this mission. One of the younger crew members, Ensign Darrow, raised a hand. Commander, if the explosion is that big, won't we be caught in it? Avell nodded slightly, which is why timing is critical. Once I plant the charges, I will signal you. You will have exactly 7 minutes to clear the blast radius. No delays, no hesitation. The crew glanced at each other. 7 minutes was nothing. It would take everything they had to get out alive. Rourke stepped closer to the table, his voice low. You've thought of every detail, haven't you? I have too, she said. The Empire sent me because this mission has no second chance. If we fail, the Sun Pures will change the balance of power forever. The enemy will crush the Empire within months. The room was heavy with the weight. Of her words, no one moved, no one spoke. They all understood. Now this was not just another mission. This was survival. Avell turned off the hologram and looked at each of them in turn. You do not have to like me, she said, but you will. Follow my orders. We will succeed because failure is not an option. Do you understand? A chorus of yes, Commander, echoed through the room. Some voices were strong, others uncertain. Rourke didn't say anything. He just watched her walk toward the exit. Her steps were steady, her back straight. She carried the weight of the mission like it was nothing, and for the first time since she arrived. Rourke felt something strange respect. As the crew began preparing for departure, Rourke stayed behind in the war room. Staring at the frozen image of the shipyard on the holodisplay, he had led men and women into impossible fights before, but this felt different. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about stopping a weapon that could end everything. And as much as he hated to admit it, maybe this pint-sized alien was the only one who could pull it off. Asterisk, the ship slid away from the safety of Imperial space, its engines humming low. The stars stretched into thin lines as the jump drive engaged. And for a brief moment, the crew felt the weight of the mission settle on their shoulders. They were heading into enemy territory, a place where no rescue would come if things went wrong. Commander Avell stood on the bridge, her small frame steady against the vibration of the ship. Her eyes were fixed on the navigation display, tracking their course through the trade lanes. The disguise codes she had provided were active now. Every signal they sent painted them as a harmless cargo vessel. Rourke watched from his usual position. At the side console, he still didn't like being second in command. But there was no denying that everything had gone smoothly so far. The codes had fooled 2 automated checkpoint scans already. And the crew was starting to accept that Avell's plans actually worked. Still, the silence of the journey felt heavy. The enemy's space was vast, but it was alive with dangers, roaming patrols, hidden minefields, and pirate bands willing to sell any captured crew to the highest bidder. Rourke kept his hand close to the manual controls, ready to take over if things went bad, hours into the journey. The ship's long-range sensors pinged. Avell leaned forward, her silver-blue fingers moving quickly over the console. Patrol ships. Ahead, she said, 3 of them, moving in formation. Rourke stepped up. If they scan us too deep, they'll see through the disguise. They won't, she replied, her voice calm. Not if we time this perfectly. The patrol ships were closing fast. Their silhouettes filled the edge of the view screen. Avell adjusted the ship's course slightly. guiding it toward a dense patch of asteroid fragments drifting through space. The fragments weren't big enough to damage the hull, but they were enough to scramble low-grade scans. "Now," she whispered, and the crew felt the engines slow, letting the asteroid field's drift carry them past the patrol route. The enemy ships sailed by without even changing course, oblivious to the silent cargo ship hidden among the rocks. When the danger passed, the crew exhaled in relief. Rourke glanced at Avelle. "Not bad," he said quietly. She didn't answer, just moved on to the next navigation adjustment. The next challenge came when the reactor's secondary coolant pump failed. Without it, the ship's heat signature would spike, making them easy to spot on enemy sensors. The engineering team scrambled to fix it, but Avelle was already on her way down to the engine room. Rourke followed, curious to see what she could do in the tight, noisy space of the reactor chamber. Avelle climbed onto the piping framework, her small size letting her reach areas no human engineer could fit into. She twisted open a panel and began working with quick, precise motions. "What are you doing?" Rourke asked over the hum of machinery. "Bypassing the damaged pump," she replied. "We'll run the coolant through the reserve channels until we reach the shipyard. It's faster than a full repair." Within minutes, the readings on the control screen stabilized. The crew and engineering stared at her, impressed. One of them, a tall mechanic named Joran, muttered, "Never thought I'd see an officer get her hands dirty." Avelle simply climbed down, wiped her hands on a rag, and said, "I do what's necessary." As the journey continued, the space outside their windows grew darker. They had left the well-mapped lanes behind. Now they were moving along hidden routes known only to smugglers and traders who dealt with both sides of the war. The stars seemed fewer here, as if the darkness itself was closing in. Late into the ship's night cycle, Rourke found Avelle alone in the observation deck. She stood with her hands behind her back, watching the void. "You know," he said, walking up beside her, "most commanders wouldn't risk this route. It's too close to enemy resupply lines." "That's why it works," she answered softly. "The enemy expects us to avoid danger. That is when they are most blind." Rourke studied her profile in the dim light. She was calm in a way he couldn't understand. No tension in her shoulders, no fear in her voice, just certainty. "You've been in situations like this before, haven't you?" he asked. Her eyes stayed on the stars, "More times than I can count," she said, "but this one is different. The Sunpires, sir, cannot be allowed to exist. It's not just a weapon, it's a message. If they finish it, every world will know the Empire cannot protect them." There was something in her tones, something personal, that made Rourke wonder what she wasn't telling him. But before he could ask, the comms officer's voice came over the intercom. "Commander, we've reached the final checkpoint before Sector 14, awaiting orders." Avelle turned away from the stars, her calm replaced by a sharp focus. "Hold position," she said. "From this point on, every move we make will decide whether we live or die." The crew felt the shift in the air. This was no longer just a journey. It was the first step into the enemy's jaws, and there would be no turning back. The Velcor shipyard filled the view screen, a monstrous ring of steel and light orbiting. A dying red star, massive construction arms reached out into space, welding together the skeleton of the Sun Piercer. Even at this unfinished stage, the weapon looked terrifying. A long, spear-like barrel, aimed at nothing yet promising destruction for anything in its path. The crew was silent as they approached. The disguise codes had gotten them this far, but here was where the real test began. One slip, one wrong answer to a dock officer's question, and the enemy would know exactly who they were. Commander Avelle stood at the helm, her voice steady, maintained civilian speed. "Keep your posture relaxed. No sudden moves." Rourke, sitting at the COMM station, adjusted the ship's ID profile again. Our registry now reads as the Kralin merchant vessel Silver Current. He said, cargo listed as industrial coolant for docking bay 7. A crackle came through the comms, a cold, clipped voice. Silver Current. State your business and present cargo manifest. Avel answered without hesitation. This is Captain Sierra of the Silver Current. We are here for delivery under contract. Code 893, Priority Class 4. Our cargo is temperature sensitive. Requesting expedited docking. There was a pause. The kind that stretched just long enough to make everyone's nerves itch. Then the voice replied, Docking Bay. 7 is clear. Proceed with approach. The crew let out the breath they'd been holding. The ship glided toward the open docking gate, passing under the shadow of massive defense cannons that could have vaporized them in seconds. Inside the dock, the scale of the shipyard became even more overwhelming. Dozens of vessels were parked, some civilian, others clearly military. Workers and security teams moved in constant streams. Scanning, unloading, repairing. The air was thick with the sound of clanging metal and the faint hiss of pressurized equipment. The ramp lowered, and Avel led the way down. Her oversized coat hid a compact explosives kit strapped to her side. Rourke followed, playing the part of a merchant's first officer, carrying a datapad loaded with forged delivery papers. A group of enemy dock officers approached, their insect-like mandibles clicking as they scanned the manifest. Delivery confirmed. One said, You have 3 hours to unload and depart. Understood, Avel replied smoothly. Then, without a glance at Rourke, she added, I will personally inspect the coolant tanks before unloading. We've had contamination issues before. So the officers didn't care another merchant's fuss wasn't their problem. They waved her through. Once out of earshot, Avel's voice dropped to a whisper. The coolant tanks are our cover. Inside them are the explosives. Sealed and shielded from scans, Rourke's grip tightened on the datapad. You're just going to walk those right into the heart of the enemies. Super weapon. Not walk, she said, her silver blue eyes glinting. Crawl. They reached a maintenance access point, guarded by a single board technician. Avel produced a clearance chip one she had apparently forged days ago. The technician barely looked up before unlocking the hatch. The passage beyond was narrow. Lined with humming pipes and flickering lights, it smelled of machine oil and heat. Rourke could barely fit. But Avel slipped through with ease, moving like she had been built for these spaces. At the first junction, she opened one of the coolant tanks, revealing the hidden charges inside. She began planting them along the power conduits, each placement precise, each timer synced to the same detonation sequence. Security sweep in 2 minutes, Rourke warned, checking his wrist display. I'll be done in 1, she replied without looking up. Her hands moved faster, twisting, locking, and sealing the charges into place. The sound of heavy boots echoed down the passage. Avel grabbed the empty coolant tank, pressed it into Rourke's hands, and whispered, Move, now. They slipped into a side tunnel, just as 2 enemy engineers passed by, chatting about supply shortages. Neither noticed the small alien and the human pressed into the shadows. They continued deeper, past the point where any human could move without crawling. The tunnel narrowed to a crawl space barely wider than Avel's shoulders. She moved ahead silently, planting the last of the charges near the Sun-Pyresur's central energy core. This is it, she whispered. Once these go off, the weapon will be nothing but molten scrap on their way back. They encountered their first real problem. A hatch that had been unlocked earlier was now sealed. The panel flashed red-locked from the security hub. They'll notice if we try to cut it, Rourke said, scanning for another way. Avel's expression didn't change. She simply removed a small device from her coat, pressed it against the panel. And after a faint click, the hatch slid open. Security bypass, she said calmly. It works on most doors. They made it back to the dock with minutes to spare. loading the now empty coolant tanks back onto their ship to any observer. It looked like a normal merchant unloading cargo. Once aboard, Avel ordered the engines warmed and the docking clamps released. "We leave now," she said, no lingering. As the Silver Current pulled away from the shipyard, Rourke glanced back at the massive ring. The sun piers were loomed larger than ever, unaware that its destruction was already ticking down in 7 minutes. Everything would change. The Silver Current drifted away from the shipyard at a calm, steady pace from the outside. It looked like nothing more than a slow-moving merchant vessel leaving after a routine delivery. Inside, the crew tried to keep their voices low, every sound feeling louder than it should. In just a few minutes, the charges would go off, and the sun piers would be reduced to molten wreckage. Rourke kept his eyes on the rear display, watching the enormous ring of the shipyard fade into the distance. He could almost taste the moment of victory. But then a sudden warning flashed. Across his console, an encrypted transmission was being sent from somewhere inside their ship. He reacted instantly, locking down internal comms. "We've got a leak," he growled. "Someone sending a signal to the enemy." Avel didn't hesitate. "Lock the cargo hold. No one leaves without my order." They moved fast. Rourke, leading to crew members to the lower deck. The cargo hold lights flickered as the ship's systems rerouted power in the far corner. They found crewman Tarek, crouched over a portable transmitter. His hands froze when he saw them. Rourke didn't bother asking questions. He lunged forward and yanked the device from Tarek's grip. Avel arrived seconds later, her silver-blue eyes colder than the void outside. "You were never a merchant's hand," she said quietly. "You've been feeding information to the Velcor since we left Imperial space." Tarek's breathing quickened. "You don't understand. If they knew it was me, they'd kill my family. They'll kill everyone if that weapon fires." Avel replied. Her voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. Before Rourke could say anything, the proximity alarms screamed. The main screen lit up with 3 enemy warships closing fast. Their weapons were already charging. The betrayal had given them away. "Get to the bridge," Avel ordered. "Now?" The crew scrambled into action. The Silver Current's disguise was useless now. Energy signatures from the charging weapons lit up like a beacon. Rourke swung into the pilot's chair as Avel took the weapons station. "They're locking on," Rourke warned. "Then we won't give them the chance," she said. Her small hands flew over the console, activating every defensive measure. The ship had point defense cannons whirred to life, missile tubes primed, the first volley hit before they could evade. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring. Rourke fought to steady the controls. "Shields at 60%, the tactical officer shouted. "Hold course," Avel snapped. "We're almost in range of the blast." Rourke glanced at her. "You mean you're going to set them off now?" She nodded. "The charges are synced to a manual override. We can trigger them early, but if we do, we'll be inside the shockwave." Another blast shook the ship, sparks raining from the ceiling. Avel's eyes narrowed. "Better we take the edge of it than let that weapon survive." She keyed the detonation code. Rourke's knuckles tightened on the controls. The seconds ticked by like hours. Then the screen went white. The explosion tore through the Velcor shipyard. A blinding sphere of fire expanding outward. The sun-pierced Sora's long barrel shattered. Pieces spinning into space. Docked ships were ripped apart, the massive construction ring folding in on itself before splitting into fragments. The shockwave hit the Silver Current like a hammer. The ship groaned as its shields flared bright. Metal screamed under the pressure. Rourke fought the controls, forcing the vessel to ride the edge of the blast rather than be swallowed by it. One enemy warship was caught in the explosion, vanishing in a burst of light. The other 2 reeled from the impact, but quickly regained pursuit. Their captains were furious now. "Both ships are faster than us." Rourke said through gritted teeth. "We won't outrun them, then we outfight them," Avelle replied. Her fingers danced over the targeting systems. The first enemy ship closed in. Firing plasma bolts that scorched their weakened shields, Rourke twisted the ship hard, letting the shots miss by meters. "Now," Avelle said sharply, launching a spread of missiles. The missiles curved around, chasing the enemy ship like predators. The warship tried to counter, but one missile slammed into its engines, tearing them apart in a cloud of fire. The last enemy ship veered in, trying to ram them. Rourke pulled the Silver Current into a steep dive, the other vessel overshooting them by a fraction. Avelle fired the main cannon straight into its exposed side. The blast ripped through its hull, sending it spinning into the dark. Silence filled the bridge, except for the hum of stressed systems. The crew stared at the displays, the wreckage of the enemy. Floating behind them, the Valcour shipyard was gone. The Sun Pure Soar was gone. Rourke turned to Avelle. "That was insane," he said. "We barely made it out alive." Avelle met his gaze with calm certainty. "But we did make it," she said, "and the Empire will, too." The ship limped toward the edge of enemy space. Battered but alive, the mission had been a success, but the cost and the betrayal would not be forgotten. The Silver Current drifted beyond the last enemy beacon, bruised and scarred from the fight. The stars here were cold and quiet. No patrols, no hostile scanners. Just the empty safety of deep space. The crew worked in silence, patching damaged systems, checking for leaks, and tending to the wounded. Every breath felt like borrowed time, but at least it was still life. Rourke stood at the helm, his hands resting on the controls. Even though the ship was on autopilot, he kept glancing at the navigation display, watching as the distance between them and the Valcour territory grew. The red line marking the danger zone finally faded from the screen. And for the first time in hours, his shoulders eased. Commander Avelle stepped onto the bridge, her coat scorched and torn at the edges. Her silver-blue skin showed faint burns along one arm, but she moved without hesitation. She stood beside Rourke, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "We made it," she said softly. Rourke nodded. "Barely," he replied. "More. You pulled off something no sane person would even try." She didn't smile. "It was necessary," she said. "The Sun Piercer would have ended the war in their favor. Now they will have to rebuild, and that will buy the Empire time." The crew began to gather, one by one, drawn to the bridge by the unspoken need to be present for whatever came next. Even the engineering team, still covered in grease, came up to stand near the back. They had all risked their lives, and they knew it. Avelle turned to face them. Her voice carried across the room, steady and clear. "You have done what few in the Empire will ever know about. You faced danger in the heart of enemy space, and you came out alive. That will never be written in history books, but it will be remembered by me." Her eyes moved over each face, and even those who had doubted her earlier could feel the weight of her words. Rourke cleared his throat. "She's right," he said. "When this mission began, I didn't think she belonged here. I thought the High Council had made a mistake." He glanced at Avelle, but I was wrong. A quiet murmur passed through the crew. Rourke went on. "I've served with some of the best commanders the Empire has, and none of them could have done what she just did. Not one." Avelle studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she inclined her head slightly. "Coming from you, Captain, I take that as high praise." He smirked faintly. "Don't get used to it." The crew chuckled, the tension breaking for the first time since they'd left Imperial space. Someone even clapped. And soon the sound grew into a round of applause. Not the loud, raucous kind, but the quiet, steady rhythm of genuine respect. Later, when the others had gone back to their duties, Rourke found Avelle in the observation deck again. She was sitting on the narrow bench watching the slow spin of distant planets. The faint light of a blue star reflected in her metallic eyes. "You ever going to tell me why the High Council trusted you with this mission?" he asked, leaning against the wall. She didn't look at him. "Because I've been here before," she said. "Not this shipyard, not this war, but missions like this, where failure means more than just losing a battle. I've lost crews before. I've seen what happens when we hesitate." Rourke stepped closer. "And you weren't going to let that happen again?" She shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "not again." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Finally, Rourke said, "You're a good commander, Abel. I still don't like how you took my chair, but I'd follow you into a fight again." Her lips curved just slightly. "I'll remember that, Captain." When they finally reached Imperial space, a transmission from the High Council was waiting. The message was brief congratulations, acknowledgement of the mission's success, and an order to prepare for debriefing. There was no celebration, no parade. Just the quiet reality of soldiers who had done their duty. But among the crew, the mood was different. They moved with a shared understanding. An unspoken bond forged in the fire of an impossible mission. Rourke knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, as the silver current set a course for home. Rourke looked once more at the woman who had arrived as a stranger and left as something far more. She wasn't just a pint-sized alien. Sent to take his place, she was the commander who had saved them all. And in the deepest part of him, Rourke knew the truth. He would follow her anywhere.